This afternoon's session will be the introduction for our speaker, be Mark Steigerwald. Mark?
Thank you, Don. I am thrilled to be able to introduce you all to Rob Dyson. So Rob has had a long association with Watkins Glen International as well as the Research Center. Excuse me. A couple of highlights of Rob's career. He received his license, his competition license in 1974. 1981, he won the SCCA GTO National Championship. 1982, Rob participated in his first professional race, IMSA GTO and SCCA Trans-Am. And in 1983, Dyson Racing was formed. 19 championships, 72 victories, and two Rolex 24 victories to date. Rob himself raced 21 seasons, 92 races, and 18 podium finishes in that time span. Rob is passionate about history, currently serves as chairman of the board of the International Motor Speedway Museum, where he oversees the museum's renovation, which is currently in the throes now towards an $89 million campaign. Last but not least, in 2011, Rob saw to it that the Research Center received a donation of the National Speed Sport News Archives, which is a collection that we use almost daily at the Research Center. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Rob Dyson.
Thanks. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the introduction. One of the things that when I was asked to speak about my personal experiences at Watkins Glen, it's hard not to be a little bit emotional about it. You know, it really comes in 4 stages. My first stage here was as a race fan. I think that's the way everybody starts, somewhere or another. You start as a race fan. You know, the first time I came up here, I drove up here from Millbrook, New York in 1963, in the summer for sports car racing. And every year, it was an odd year if I didn't come up here at least twice. It was summer at Watkins Glen. Summer at Watkins Glen was a norm of some sort of racing, sometimes twice. Can-Am, sports cars, any kind of event that was taking place in the summer. Or alternatively, either freezing or getting sunburned in October for the F1 race. Many of you probably attended the F1 races. My first one was in 1965. And the one thing that so disturbed me was it took an awful lot of effort to get into the pits. And fortunately, if you looked at the color coding of the pit passes in those days and brought one of those packets of multicolored that you get in the school supply store, multicolored, you get the rest of the idea. Just to show you how important Watkins Glen and being here and coming to events at Watkins Glen as a race fan, my wife and I were married on August 28th, 1971. In October of 1971, she joined me up here. Fortunately, we were able to get passes, and it didn't rain that year. But she really enjoyed it. But I'll talk about her in a few minutes. So here you go. It started as being a race fan. When I was in graduate school at Cornell starting in 1972, I came over here, cut classes to come over here for the US Grand Prix because it was so close by. I mean, Ithaca is what, about 45 minutes, an hour away, right? I came over the hill, came here when they were unloading the trucks. I said, I'll get here on Sunday or Monday just to see what's going on. I helped them unload the trucks. So I got a pass that enabled me to come, and I came every single day, including race day. But with the pass, I was able to get around. That was in 72 and 73. I spent the entire week here. And that was in the days when the cars were brought in on a kind of a car hauler. And the crews were smaller, and they rolled the cars into the Kendall Center. And it was fairly primitive, but it was Formula One. And it was amazing when you think back on it, how it's all evolved. Now you have crews, minimal crews, probably, I would be surprised if they don't have 200 people at the race per car. In addition to that, I will also admit that I would come over here in my BMW during graduate school, periodically, and drive this racetrack. There were very few barriers, and frankly, there was a county road that went right through the racetrack, right? Right, guys? Remember? I'll even show it to you if you wanted me to show you. But anyway, there was a track. You could come up to the track, get in, and I wouldn't drive for high speeds, but I would drive the racetrack for maybe half an hour, just driving down into the boot, coming up out of the boot, driving around one of the barricades that were minimal, not even covering the whole width of the racetrack. Excuse me. Now, I don't want to pull a Rudy Giuliani thing talking to my wife, but let me find out how my son is doing at COTA, would you please? I'm speaking. You want to tell me how you're doing? All right. Just have a great conversation. We'll talk after. As a longtime car owner, that sounds ominous to me. Anyway, so you have to understand that it was Rob Dyson, the race fan, that first got acquainted with this wonderful facility at a very early age. This was when the pits, before the boot was built, before the pits were built, before even the access or anything remotely approaching a media center was ever built. Then we go to stage 2, descending into the depths. Now, the depths means I started to race myself. I came over here to start researching. I came over in October of 1973. I said to my wife, I want to do it for 1 year because I've been working on cars all my life. Going to car races, I want to see what it's like to be out there. What's it like out there? The great question that Chris Economaki used to always ask drivers, what's it like out there? I wanted to experience it myself. So I started with a Datsun 510. It was crewed by me and my wife. My second driver's school was here. That was when I got my regional license. My first one was at Thompson in Connecticut, and then came up here. And that gave me a regional license. And then I could go racing. Numerous races in regional racing. We were twice a year up here. At the national level, it was either the Finger Lakes region, the New York region, or the New England region that was sanctioning it. And all of a sudden, here I was racing on a track that I was truly finding out what it's like out there. And I really, really liked it. It was the ultimate ability to be able to get out there and do what I'd always kind of thought would be pretty cool to do, but I wanted to experience it, and I was able to do that. And in 1981, I won the GT2 National Championship, and in 1981, I won the championship, and in 82, I started doing more club racing, but to qualify for the runoffs, I only needed to do 6 races because I was automatically qualified to come back. I don't know what the rule is now, but that was the rule then. But in 1982, I decided that maybe I should step up. And a good friend of mine, Bob Aiken, a dear friend, said, Rob, it's time to get out of club racing. So that was stage 3. You see how I'm descending into the depths or rising to the, elevating further up the pyramid, I guess? And I went from SCCA amateur racing to SCCA and IMSA professional racing. First in 83 and 84 in a GTO / Trans-Am Pontiac Firebird, which was probably the lousiest car I'd ever driven. But by then I had a small crew of guys, there were 5 of us, and we learned a lot from that. And what I learned was how good our guys were and how we should also move up to take the next step to get into prototypes. It was there that I had a very interesting conversation with Bob Aiken because I related it to Bob. I said, Bob, I want to move up. He said, you should. He said that because we had won, we had come third in the 500-miler at Elkhart. I never did a lot of races in the Pontiac. And actually, after 1981, I never did a full season of racing in any form of any racing that Dyson Racing did. And I said, look, I'm going to go over to England and see the guys at March. And he shakes his finger just like this. Nobody collects marches. He said, the big thing you've got to do is get into a car that you know is going to work. I said, well, look, nobody can get the 962s. He says, let me call Hobart. You know Hobart. Why don't you call him? So I called Al, and I said, Al, I want to get a 962. He said, yeah, Aiken called me. He says, let me see what I can do. And shortly thereafter, we worked a transaction with Bruce Levin, who was a Bayside Disposal entrepreneur, who later became a very dear friend, who I shared several races with. And we were able to get the 962. We picked it up in March and raced it at Lime Rock, and we won our first race at Lime Rock. The thing that was interesting is one of my crew guys said, why don't we retire undefeated? We didn't, of course. So we started racing real cars, like Hobart says, you want to get into real racing. Here we were running the Porsches. To come up here to Watkins Glen at the sharp end of the entire field, to qualify with all of these great professional drivers and to go out and run with them. Going up the back straight that I had done so many times from my BMW to my Trans-Am car, to my B sedan, to my Trans-Am car, but then to do it in a 962 Porsche was an experience that, other than doing Le Mans, was kind of breathtaking, actually. Then there were a couple other professional races that I did here that was not in the 962, that was done in the Burger King 24 hours. That was one of the greatest events I've ever participated in. Burger King was part of the Firehawk Challenge, which was a showroom stock class. And showroom stock, it depended what manufacturer you were working with. I was driving with Bob Aiken. And depending on what showroom stock was, depended on how the manufacturer kind of said what was showroom stock and what wasn't. The advantage that we had better fuel economy and better wear on our tires. But those Burger King races had 70 or 80 cars running here at night. And even if you have 70 or 80 cars running here at night, Watkins Glen in the middle of the night is a very dark place to race. And then we started running other prototypes as I started getting less involved in the cars, and my son, Chris, his first professional race was up here. We had come up here the week before the IMSA race with the Rileys to do Goodyear tire testing. And Chris came up, and he had a spec racer Ford, and we let him run when we weren't running, when we were adjusting the car, changing something. And I said, why don't we just put Chris in the car and see how he would do? And in 6 laps, he would have finished 6th. He would have qualified 6th in the grid the year before. So I said to the organizers when the weekend started, I said, hey, I want to add my son. He's got a SCCA competition license. Can we give him an IMSA license? He's got all the medical. And Chris got in and drove his first pro race in a Riley. He took my time away from me in the 6 hour. And unfortunately, we had an electrical problem with the car, but Chris did a terrific job, and that led to him, barely a year later, he and James Wee were winning the 6 hours at Watkins Glen. When I think back, asked to reflect on my experiences here, coming here even today is like visiting an old friend. It's such a familiar place. Even getting up here is familiar. The roads, the surroundings, the town. It's been so many years of this being a part of my life. Just this past couple of months ago, we had a Rensport reunion. And at an autograph session, I was sitting next to Terry Bootson, who he and I became friends as a result of, he was driving for Champion Racing in the 911s at all the racetracks. But it was funny, he came up here, came over to me and said, he had never been here before. This is Terry Bootson, a well-known, effective F1 and sports car champion. And he asked me, you know, what's the track like and all that, and I pointed out the different aspects of the boot and all that. And he, after the race, came up to me and he says, this is the best racetrack I've ever driven. He said, I've never experienced a track where you can get such a great rhythm and go so fast and enjoy the change in the elevation, but also the passing zones, the pit area. It was just a great experience. I felt great about that because that's exactly how I felt. But having a guy like this who's raced every fathomable racetrack except this place, coming to me and telling me, you know, Rob Dyson, who came here in 1963, he's telling me what a great racetrack it is as we both get out of our cars. The heritage of this place, because personally that I've experienced, the victories of mine and my son are really, when I think back on it, it's a gift. It's a gift to win a car race. But we've also been here for the tragedy too. And everybody can remember the F1, some of the F1 incidences that have happened here. Francois Sever being kind of the highest profile. I was here also when Graham Hill damn near got killed, broke both his legs when his car went end over end up in the back straight because of his suspension failure. But I think the other thing I want to reflect on is how important the International Motor Racing Research Center is. I finished a race up here. We had won in the mid-'80s, and Jean Argetsinger came up to me at the end of the race, and she said, Rob, I'm raising money at the Watkins Glen Library to start a motor racing library for the world to be able to come and do research. And it's going to be done out of the Watkins Glen Library. And I was wondering if you would want to contribute. Well, here we had just won, I think, about $180,000, which is a lot of money, camel money. Needless to say, when a woman like that asks you for money, right, boys, you respond, right? And that was my first gift to the International Motor Racing Research Center. And it's the gratitude that I have for the Argot Singers for preserving this place, creating it and then preserving it, and then seeing how it's been changed and how it's improved over the years. The bottom line here is that Watkins Glen is different than all the other racetracks because of its age and because of its heritage and because it's the same place that everybody raced on: Formula One, Can-Am, sports cars, Indy cars, all happened here. It's a wonderful place. The research center has been a remarkable resource for so many people, and I'm honored to have been a part of it. And I'm honored to be here today, and I thank you very much. Questions? I guess we have
Questions?
some questions. Anybody want to? I'm an old racer, so speak up.
I'd like to correct you on the highway. It was a town-maintained road you were on.
Oh, sorry.
The second course was town-maintained roads because the state tried to take and initiate laws to stop racing on public roads, and it failed in committee. Therefore, they wouldn't give us a permission with a permit, or Lloyd's would run through town. The second course was a town-maintained road, and also Reinhardt Road, which comes up the center from Gate 3, where the start-finish line was for the second course. And also, it was a Glen Region sanctioned events or Finger Lakes. I may, on that, here.
It was Finger Lakes region sanctioned here.
Yeah, club racing they did, and still do. And so doesn't the Glen region.
Right.
So, but anyway, I wanted to help you with that one too.
Well, thanks for the...
I'm Bill Green, and I'm a historian for the Glen region and the IMRRC.
Thanks for the clarification. It wasn't the county, it was the town that was doing it. Just want to make sure, I will make sure that in future remarks, I'll make sure that I mention that. Remember, I'm an old racer here.
On the maps today, the section from Wedgewood Road Crossroads with Meads Hill has been abandoned, not abandoned, let lay under the trade when WGI bought the circuit here. The deal was, the first thing that was said to Frank Gannon, who was the supervisor of the town of Dix at that time, Jim Riesbeck says, "How can we close the public roads?" And he said, "It won't be hard." And it was done. That he was looking at the tourism, and he wasn't a race fan. He was my stepfather. So, but anyways, I wanted to tell you that too. That was done in Corning at one of the meetings with WGI and the town. So that's just for information.
Well, good. I thought it was just the Argot Singers, but I guess we got to thank him as well. You know, interesting.
Mr. Dyson, do you recall the first time that you went off track in your early racing career, and how did you feel? Were you disappointed, or did you just have fire in the belly to come back?
I'm not sure I heard the question. Just say that again, will you?
Early in your racing career, do you remember the first time that you went off track, and how did you feel about that? Were you disappointed, or did you have the fire to come back?
It's the old saying, if you're not up on the curbs, you're not trying hard enough. Like Mario Andretti says, if you're not out of control 90% of the time, you're not going quick enough. Sometimes I went up over, like the 11th, 10th. The only thing I can tell you is that ground effects does not work on the grass. I try not to think about where I went off the first time, but I can remember one thing. I can remember when I backed up a hay wagon at the farm, and the hitch broke, and the hay wagon rolled back into my mother's garden. I can remember another time when my younger brother and I were washing my brother's car, and my younger brother went into the interior and tripped the parking brake, so when we left the car that was clean, it had just rolled into the farm pond, and we had to get the tractors pretty quick before my brother got home. But actually, look, if you're racing, you're gonna one time or another, you're gonna meet a obstacle. And I don't remember actually ever doing it up here. I think this was a place you were going pretty quick. You didn't want to be careful. I guess the biggest ride I ever took probably was at Lime Rock, coming down the downhill in a 510, and I went off the track coming down the straight, and I stayed straight and then bounced along the straightaway until the car slowed, and then went back on the racetrack. Look, you got to just gather it up and keep going. It's one of those things, it's just a behavioral thing. You just, you're in the moment, and you just got to keep going. So I never had any fear, although I will tell you that I was constantly afraid of the dark until I did Le Mans in 1986. It was the only time I did it. And it was cold and dark and raining in the middle of the night, and doing 220 miles an hour down the back straight in the dark with the rain beating on the windshield. All of a sudden, I kind of put a lot of things in perspective, and I'm not afraid of the dark anymore.
Is there any certain aspect of the racetrack here that you find most prevalent racing on, or like least prevalent, like the boot or the 90, for example?
I can't quite hear. What was the question again?
Which part of the circuit do you find the most fun here, Watkins Glen, or like the least fun when you were driving?
You mean here?
Yes.
This place? Pretty hard to pick out a place that is not kind of interesting. The best thing about Watkins Glen, it's a very fair track. Whoever did the initial design, I get, but when they did the boot, whoever did that was inspired, because they really made it. First, they made it longer. The pit, the length was extensively lengthened. The loop, the inner loop, which we raced a couple of times in IMSA, I found was not very interesting. I'll tell you a funny story. We were up here testing, and they brought, I think they brought up one of the NASCAR guys. I'll think of his name in a minute. Anyway, they brought him up here to run a NASCAR car around we were doing Goodyear testing, and they brought up a NASCAR car to drive around to see what it would like to take the stock car race and run through the inner loop. And Bobby Labonte. And he came and ran the car around several laps, and he came up, he said, look, you'll put so many cars in that downhill that when you go down a hill and turn left in the boot, coming off the loop, you come down. He said, you'll have more cars piled into there. You'll never get a race run. So needless to say, they said, okay, we won't ever run it. And they still don't, right? They still don't run the boot. They just run the loop, right? Right? Okay. But this track is fair. It's fast, but it's fair. But I will tell you that after the Francois Cerver crash, Jackie Stewart rated the S's as the most dangerous corners in the world for Formula One. I find that incredibly hard to believe that was true. But they then went on a campaign to alter the approach to the S's in a variety of different ways. hay bales, constructing a funny fence, so then you had to slow and come through it, downshift first, second gear to come up. They're racing now. Of course, the cars, I will tell you, cars are a lot safer now than they were when I started racing. But now, I think enough people have enough knowledge about how to run those S's, and I think that everybody understands that this is a pretty fast part of the course, that was appropriate. When I first started racing here, though, they did not have the chicane. You went ripping into that at the end of the front straight, of the back straight, going up the hill. You were really flying. And that corner going down to the downhill, that was pretty exciting. I've got to tell you, that was one that you really, of all the racetracks that I've raced on at that time, and even now when I think about it, that was a very fast corner. And it was after a couple of incidences that they decided maybe we better slow the cars down a little, which they did through that little chicane there. But the course is just great. It's fast, it's wide, it's got plenty of places to pass. They've moved, obviously, with the big cars and the stock car guys and all that. And the way tracks are being run now, they've moved all the walls back. Get the walls, but when we first started racing here, the walls were right along the perimeter of the racetrack, but on either side of the track. But now it's opened up a lot more, so people some parts of the curbing is widened up. But even in the old days, when they first built the boot and we first started running it, it was just a fabulous racetrack and continues, in essence, the same configuration as it was then, it is now. Super, it's a great racetrack. I want to reflect on one final thing that I didn't bring up. My first race here was a regional race in 1974. My last race was the 6 hour in 2007. And when I got out of the car in 2007, I said, well, I just felt that was it. And when I got out of the car and walked away, I didn't think about it till my son the next day said, Dad, that was the site of your first race, wasn't it? I said, yeah. He said, did you intend to make it your first and last race, or would it be Watkins Glen? I said, no. But if I ever wanted to make it a decision, it was the right one. So this track has been such a part of my life. And now I'm a proud father watching my son. And based on what I'm seeing around the shop with the go-karts, and I'm hearing about a local little speedway, maybe I'll be seeing my grandchildren up here too. It's a great place, and I'm honored to be here. Any other questions? I'll be around. I'm staying for dinner. Got a microphone on there? Thanks for having me, folks. Hope I'm not keeping everybody.
Oh, no, we'll do one more question.
Well, my husband's first question was he'd love to have a beer with you sometime. No, I know. My question is, from the transition from being a race fan to being a race driver to then being a race father, what is your favorite stage?
All of them.
Sure.
At the time, everyone seemed to kind of work. It was it's truly an evolution of a racing career, I guess you could say. Actually, it wasn't until I was asked to do this that I actually started to put my thinking together. That really it's the evolution of a racing career. Mm-hmm. There are very few drivers that are driving in cars that are racing cars that didn't start off as race fans. I find it hard to believe that they wouldn't have had some kind of inkling that they wanted to go racing at some time or another, as kids or whatever. So I think what it was is it's the evolution of a race fan becoming a race driver. I mean, it was important for me to get out there because I figured I was 27 years old. I didn't have any kids. I just came out of grad school. I had just started my broadcasting business. And I said, I've got to I've got to do this, if for no other reason but to say that at least I understand what's going on. But that was in 1974, and I'm still doing it. I'm not driving cars, but the race shop, the race team, all of what's going on. My son just called me. I mean, I'm into it up to here. And then with all the other things I'm doing with the Speedway Museum and the Research Center, which Chris is now a part of, I mean, it never ends, and you don't want it to end because it's such a captivating sport. I mean, it's just interesting. And it is all stories. Anybody that's here can relate half a dozen stories about this place. Whether you were at the bog or whether you were, watching or seeing Jim Clark or hearing the Matras go up the back straight, or watching the Indy cars in the 70s and 80s. I mean, it's just, it's stories, it's memories, it's things that you'd rather be here than anywhere else when you were here. That's the way I felt at every racetrack, and it's still the way I feel. Whenever I go through the gates of a racetrack, after all these years and after all these races, whenever I go through the gates of a racetrack, my heart just beats a little quicker. And why is that? Because it's so goddamned interesting. And you know that there's going to be something that's going to educate you. Something is going to give you a sense of more awareness of something. And this place is one of the best places, in my opinion, the best place to experience that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much. Now we get the next one up.